Chapter 80, Animagus. Animagus is one of the highest achievements in Transfiguration. It allows a wizard to turn into a specific, non-magical animal, an ability that makes it easy to disguise oneself or work undercover. The ritual is exacting. A mandrake leaf must be kept in the mouth for an entire lunar cycle, from full moon to full moon, without swallowing it or ever taking it out. If the leaf leaves the mouth, the process must begin again. On the second full moon, the leaf is removed. A small crystal vial is filled with the saliva, and the leaf is immersed in it to bask in pure moonlight. If that night is cloudy, a new mandrake leaf must be found, and the whole procedure restarted. To the moonlit vial, one adds a hair of one's own and a silver teaspoon of dew gathered from a place that has had neither sunlight nor human touch for 7 days. Finally, a death's head hawkmoth pupa is added, and the mixture is set aside in a quiet, dark place until the next storm that brings lightning. It must not be looked at or disturbed meanwhile. The whole process requires luck as much as skill. The waiting can span weeks, months, even years, and that is why so few wizards ever complete it. Dewey trusted his luck. After obtaining the Animagus instructions, he was keen to know what animal he might become. He lay on his back and watched the full moon through the skylight, feeling fortune on his side. From his spatial pouch, he produced a mandrake and plucked its tenderest new leaf, slipping it beneath his tongue. It felt odd, but it barely interfered with speech or eating. Exhaustion from the mountain trek and the recent fights took him almost instantly to sleep. He slept comfortably. Bjorn, the skin changer, had been outside all night in bear form. Dewey trusted the man. Bjorn was no villain, so, unlike the nervous dwarves, he slept as if under Gandalf's protection. Morning came with the clatter of activity. One by one, everyone woke. When Dewey peered through a crack in the door, the enormous bear was gone. In its place, a very tall man was swinging a giant axe, chopping wood with astonishing ease. Gandalf told the dwarves to stay inside for now and to come out 2 by 2 only when he gave the signal. Bjorn, he said, did not care for dwarves. Then he, Dewey, and Bilbo stepped out together. Bilbo, puzzled, nudged Gandalf. "You seem a little nervous?" "Me? Nervous?" Gandalf protested with a shake of his head, though his manner betrayed him. Dewey could not help smiling at the discomfort. After taking over Bjorn's house the night before and keeping its owner out the door, he could understand the awkwardness. The three of them approached the man. He was massive, 3 meters at least, with black hair and a thick beard, broad shoulders, and a bare chest. One swing of his axe split a log in 2. He was swinging as if they were not there. "Ahem, good morning," Gandalf called first. The man kept chopping. "Good morning." Gandalf raised his voice. The man stopped, turned with his axe in hand, and regarded them with cold suspicion, as if he could split them like kindling. "Who are you?" he growled. "Gandalf the Grey," Gandalf replied. "This is the black-robed wizard Dewey, and this is Bilbo Baggins," Gandalf added. The man snorted. "Never heard of them." Gandalf's throat tightened. "Perhaps you've heard of Radagast. He lives on the western edge of Mirkwood." "What do you want?" the man demanded. "Only to thank you for your hospitality," Gandalf said, unabashed. "We sheltered in your room last night." "2 wizards and a hobbit. What brings you here?" The man scrutinized them. Gandalf began to explain, mentioning their trouble with the orcs in the mountains. "Thanks to Dewey here, we were able to come through. He killed Azog, you know." At the name, Bjorn stiffened and strode forward, about to seize Gandalf by the collar. Gandalf stepped back and put Dewey forward instead. "You heard right, Mr. Bjorn. Azog is dead. He was killed yesterday by this wizard, Dewey, right before your eyes." Bjorn's wild, sharp gaze fixed on Dewey. "Is this true?" Dewey met the stare without flinching. "It's true. A lie would be easy to disprove." Bjorn regarded him intently a long moment, then the hard pressure of his presence eased and a small, unpleasant smile appeared. "I believe you. Orcs are my enemies. You killed their leader, then you are my friend." At that instant, the dwarves took Gandalf's earlier instruction as a cue and began to come out 2 by 2. Bjorn's amiable expression vanished. He snatched up his axe and looked savagely at the dwarves. "You brought dwarves?" Gandalf flushed. "Well, there are. You call them a few?" Bjorn cut in. "How many are there?" 13, Gandalf admitted weakly. Bjorn's hostility flared, but he did not strike. "I hate dwarves. They're greedy and blind, but I hate orcs more." He spoke quietly now, and the hurt in his voice showed why. My folk once lived these mountains. Orcs came down from the north. Azog the Defiler killed almost all my family. Now only I remain. You are hunted by orcs. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You may stay here." He invited them in and provided bread, milk, and honey. His mood toward the dwarves remained chilly, but toward Dewey he was warm. He seated Dewey closest and made him tell, in detail, how he had killed Azog. Gandalf, sitting on Bjorn's other side, added details here and there. Through conversation, Dewey learned more about the man. Bjorn could not only change into a massive bear, he could also speak to animals in their own tongue. By growls and roars he commanded them. The estate buzzed with animal servants: 4 white horses, several gray dogs, a black ram, flocks of snow-white sheep, cows, chickens, mice, bees, each answering to Bjorn's call and carrying out its work with dedicated purpose. It was an animal kingdom, orderly and efficient. Everyone there was astonished. Dewey felt a sharp envy. Bjorn's gifts resembled the old stories of druids: enormous, magical transformation, and an ability to communicate with beasts. Dewey himself had mastered only Parseltongue so far. Even with success at Animagus, he would turn into an ordinary animal. Bjorn's bear was not simply large. Its strength and defenses were extraordinary, far beyond those of an ordinary bear. If Dewey could learn the secret of Bjorn's transformation, perhaps he could combine it with Animagus magic and become, for the first time, a wizard who turned into something more than a mere animal. But that was for the future. First, he had to succeed at the long, uncertain ritual he had already begun. Chapter 81: Gandalf's Wand. At Bjorn's invitation, the company stayed an extra day at his house. Dewey used the time to finish Gandalf's wand. The vinewood shaft had already been carved. The only thing missing was a core, which they had finally found. He prepared the glues and lacquers, then, under Gandalf's expectant gaze, carefully worked the Eagle King's tail feather. With fine tweezers, he set the feather evenly into the hollow of the shaft, filled the cavity with resin until core and wood were fused, then sanded, polished, and engraved ancient runes on the tip. By the time the moon was highest, the wand lay complete in his hands. Dewey raised it, intoning a long, intricate charm. Moonlight pooled like silver mist around the tip and flowed into the wand, waking it. When the wand thrummed like something alive, Dewey smiled with satisfaction and handed it to Gandalf. 12 inches, he said. Vinwood shaft, good for a wizard of noble purpose, a mind that looks farther than most. An Eagle King feather for the core makes it quick to cast with, suitable for forceful and offensive spells, and steady in loyalty. Try it, Dewey urged. This was his first wand for someone else. He was eager to see it used. Gandalf took it with both hands, his face bright with curiosity. A gentle flick, and he cast his favorite, light. A brilliant radiance flared from the tip and illuminated his smiling face. "What a marvelous feel," he laughed. "It is as if my arm stretches. Casting has become simpler, almost effortless." Dewey felt that warm, tail-wagging pleasure a maker must feel when a tool finds its owner. He understood suddenly why wand-makers like Ollivander took such satisfaction in their work. Still, he could not help being a little critical. "It was put together a touch hastily," he said. "Use it for now. I'll make you a finer one when I can." From the wand-maker's eye, the materials were not perfect. The vinewood had been taken from an ordinary Huorn branch, and although the Eagle King feather worked, it was not the ideal core for someone like Gandalf. Dewey mused that someday he might find better magical timber, perhaps descendants of the white tree or the melon tree, and craft another wand. If he grew stronger, he even wondered, half in jest and half in a daring thought, whether a core tied to the Balrog in Moria, one day a deadly rival, might suit a fire-natured ring of magic. For now, however, Gandalf was delighted. He waved the wand and sent forth gusts of wind, slashes of light, sparks of fire and lightning. The more he played, the brighter his eyes shone. In a lowered voice meant for Dewey alone, Gandalf murmured, "Thank you, I can feel it. Some of the restraints on my power are lessened when I use this." Dewey's eyes widened. He knew Gandalf was bound by limits set by the Valar. The wizard could not use whatever power he wished. "Are you certain?" he asked, barely believing it. "It's true," Gandalf nodded. "I still cannot summon great world-shaping magics, but many of the simpler spells no longer feel fenced in." Dewey grinned and offered sincere congratulations. He pictured Gandalf, a wand in one hand and his foe hammer in the other, freer than before and smiling at the thought. Before they left Beorn's, with his host's permission, Dewey used a little bit of enchantment to link Born's hearth to the Floo network and handed the big bear a small pouch of Floo powder, inviting him to visit Weathertop if he wished. Born was astonished by the magic and pleased by the invitation. They did not linger longer. After breakfast the next day, they rode out. At parting, Beorn lent them horses to carry them to the edge of Mirkwood, then, with a growl of concern, told Gandalf some troubling news. Orcs had been gathering around Dol Guldur at the southern end of the wood, he said, and there were signs of Nazgul. Gandalf's smile vanished. He fell quiet, the news settling on him like a cold hand. The company rode on in tense silence until at last they arrived at the edge of Mirkwood. There, unexpectedly, Gandalf announced he must leave the party for a while and asked to go elsewhere. Surprise and dismay rippled through the group. Thorin's brow set in a hard frown. To him, nothing mattered more than reaching the lonely mountain, and Gandalf's departure felt almost like desertion. Dewey, however, was not surprised. Gandalf had warned him such a thing might happen before they set out. With the tidings from Radagast and Beorn, a change in Gandalf's plans was hardly shocking. For Gandalf, the expedition was never only about the mountain. It was to prevent Smaug or any alliance of evil from tipping the balance in Middle-earth. Orcs massing in Dol Guldur and the presence of Nazgul were far graver than any single dragon. Dewey hesitated, torn. He remembered things Gandalf did not, knew in fact, that if Gandalf went now, he might be led into a trap, that he could be taken by the necromancer, imprisoned and tortured, and that only the arrival of the White Council would ultimately free him. He was tempted to warn the wizard bluntly. Gandalf, he began, uncertain, have you considered that this might be a trap? Orcs gather in Dol Guldur, and Nazgul have been seen there. Their master may well be hidden inside. If you go alone, you could be trapped. Gandalf's face grew solemn. That is precisely why I must go, he said quietly. If the necromancer is Sauron, then it must be made known. We cannot allow a shadow to grow unnoticed. If I can bring proof, the free peoples may be roused and united against a rising evil. Then his face softened, and he offered Dewey a half-smile, an invitation in his eyes. Come with me, he added. With the two of us together, even if we are outmatched, we can still make our retreat. Dewey started, uncomprehending for a moment. What? Me? With you? His eyes widened in astonishment. Chapter 82, Seeing the Brown Wizard Again. That's right, Gandalf said, nodding. I have a feeling this trip will go more smoothly than last time, perhaps without any major incident. Dewey couldn't share the optimism. He knew his own limits. Even Gandalf was no match for Sauron. Adding himself to the company would not tip the balance. At best, he would be an extra burden, at worst bait. Gandalf, why don't we call for more help? Lord Elrond, Lady Galadriel. Send word to Rivendell or Lothlorien. There's no time. Gandalf shook his head. Beorn told me orcs have been gathering in Dol Guldur for days. Something large is imminent. We must investigate now and prepare. We can't wait for Galadriel or others to arrive. No, Gandalf, there is time. Dewey smiled and, with a casual motion, produced a small bag of Floo powder from his spatial pouch and gave it a shake. Did you forget I have this? Dewey never rushed into a fight unprepared. Since Dol Guldur was dangerous, he preferred not to risk acting alone with Gandalf against the might of Sauron. I've already linked Beorn's fireplace to the Floo network, straight to the fireplace in Rivendell. We can return to Beorn's, or even go to Rivendell directly, and call for Elrond's assistance. Gandalf's face brightened as he slapped his forehead. I'm getting old, and my thoughts are rigid. I can't keep up with the flexibility of you young ones. But we don't even need to go back to Beorn, Gandalf said. There's an even better option. Before we go to Dol Guldur, we should visit an old friend who lives in the southern part of the Great Greenwood, much closer to Dol Guldur. We can use his hearth to reach Rivendell. You mean Radagast the Brown? It is he. So Dewey consented. He and Gandalf separated from the main company to go and investigate Dol Guldur. Thorin was furious. I disagree, he snapped, glaring at Gandalf. You may go, but Duir stays with us. It's not our business whether orcs or necromancers gather in Dol Guldur. Our concern is the Lonely Mountain, Thorin said hotly. Our only goal is to reach the mountain before Durin's day. recover the Arkenstone, and reclaim my kingdom. Dewey tried to placate him. Thorin, I promise to help you reclaim the mountain. I won't break that promise. We'll meet up with you before Durin's Day. Dol Guldur affects all of Middle-earth, Gandalf said. We must investigate to stop the darkness before it grows again and threatens your quest. Thorin sniffed scornfully. What does Middle-earth's fate have to do with me? I want the Arkenstone in my kingdom. He then turned, jaw clenched, and fixed Dewey with an accusing stare. Duir, are you sure you want to go with him? Don't forget you signed a contract with me. Are you intending to break it? Dewey felt the familiar headache of arguing with someone single-mindedly focused on their own goal. I gave you my word. We'll rejoin you in time to fight Smaug and take back the mountain. Thorin's face darkened. I hope so. If you fail to fulfill the contract, don't expect a single copper from me. They parted on strained terms. Dewey and Gandalf rode south along the Anduin, while Thorin and his company took the old road through the heart of Mirkwood. Bilbo would have liked to go with Dewey, but Gandalf persuaded him to stay with the dwarves. After several hours, they reached the southernmost edge of the great greenwood and dismounted. A narrow track wound into the trees, and at the end of it stood a small cabin of stone and timber. It looked neglected. The thatch had run to weeds, the stones were furred with moss, and mushrooms pushed up against the wooden walls. Only a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney suggested it was lived in. The door opened from within, and Radagast the Brown stepped out, surprise and delight on his weathered face. Gandalf, what brings you here? Radagast, Gandalf replied with a smile. Dewey and I were passing and thought to visit. Will you have us? Of course, come in. Radagast welcomed them, then his eyes lit when he saw Dewey. I remember you, young wizard, the one who helped drive off the orcs and wargs last time. It's good to see you again, Dewey said, returning the smile. Radagast ushered them into the cluttered cabin and poured a pot of tea brewed from root herbs. Dewey took a cautious sip. The flavor was bitter and earthy, bringing to mind the herbal remedies he'd known in his previous life. But it was more than that. The tea had a subtle magic to it that eased the wariness of travel. Hogwarts Sign-in System, location Mirkwood, Radagast the Brown's cabin. Do you want to sign in? The system prompted. Dewey's face lit up. Sign in. Sign in successful. You have obtained Professor Sprout's herbology knowledge. Information flooded his mind. Methods for cultivating, harvesting, and using magical plants and herbs, as if memories were being gently pressed into his head. In minutes, he absorbed a substantial mastery of herbology. Dewey's plan, to compare Hogwarts plants and potions with those of Middle-earth, find equivalents, and create new brews, suddenly seemed a step closer to reality. He smiled inwardly at the unexpected boon and took another sip of tea. Immediately, the name and properties of the herb in his cup came to him as clearly as a label. Radagast noticed Dewey's delight and brightened. He poured a second cup. As the wizard among the Istari, most intimate with plants, Amaya with a close affinity to Yavanna's work, Radagast loved talking about herbs. Seeing Dewey so interested, he eagerly shared everything he knew. Dewey, who had a background with herbal remedies, listened and contributed ideas of his own. His suggestions about practical applications and cross-cultural potion-making thrilled Radagast. The two fell into an animated conversation, exchanging observations and recipes under Gandalf's mildly amused gaze. After a while, Gandalf cleared his throat. Radagast blinked, startled back to the present. Oh, sorry, Gandalf. I forgot you were here between the two of you. So what brings you here, really? Chapter 83, Return to Rivendell. We learned from Beorn that orcs have been gathering at Dol Guldur, Gandalf said, and we mean to go and find out why. Radagast's face went pale. Don't go, he blurted. Please, Gandalf, don't. I felt a great dark power out there, Gandalf answered calmly. It reached me even from afar. It alarms me. That power has crept into Mirkwood and drawn hordes of foul creatures. It grows more dangerous by the day. Then all the more reason to stay away, Radagast protested. Darkness has returned. Why rush toward it? You and I, together, we would never leave safely. Gandalf smiled and shook his head. It will not be just us. We came for your help, old friend. Me? Radagast cried. You know I am no warrior. If it's a fight you seek, I would only lower our odds. Walking into a trap knowingly is folly. Do not be so quick to refuse, Gandalf urged. Duir agrees with you. That is precisely why we intend to gather more allies and face Dol Guldur together. Allies? Which allies? Radagast asked. Duir, short, quick of motion, and quieter in speech, stood and crossed to the hearth. May I borrow your fireplace? He asked. Borrow the fireplace? Radagast echoed, surprised, but he nodded. Of course. Duir waved his wand and muttered a few words. From a pocket, he produced a small glass phial sparkling with powder. Time is short, he said, smiling. We should be on our way. Gandalf took a pinch of the clear powder and tossed it into the fire. The flames flared green. Rivendell, he cried. He stepped into the green and vanished in an instant. Radagast stared, wide-eyed, then hurried forward, peering into the hearth as if the wizard might be hiding behind the coals. Where did Gandalf go? Rivendell, Duir said, handing the phial to him. Take a handful. Make sure you clearly call the destination when you throw it at your feet, or you might arrive somewhere else entirely. Radagast took the powder like a child tempted to taste sugar, but Duir's steady look kept him from it. Following Duir's instructions, he stepped into the flames, scattered the powder, and shouted, Rivendell! He, too, disappeared. Duir followed, calling the same word, and in the same dizzying instant, the three of them were gone. Duir felt the familiar tick of travel and for a blink caught a glimpse of Bjorn's window and the tall shape of Bjorn in the living room. Then his feet met stone, and he was coughing ash from his mouth. Pah! Clean, he muttered, waving his hand and speaking the small cleansing spell. The Floo journey was fast and reliable. The only nuisance was the inevitable dusting of soot. They stepped out into the dusk at Rivendell to find Gandalf already waiting, a smear of gray on his cloak. Elrond stood beside him, composed and serene. Duir, do clean Radagast and me, Gandalf said, grinning. It would be poor form to be presented to Lord Elrond looking like we crawled from a chimney. Duir obliged, sweeping a quick charm over them both until their robes were free of ash. He bowed a little to Elrond. Lord Elrond, it has been a long time. Welcome back to Rivendell, Wizard Duir, Elrond replied with a gentle smile. How quickly the days pass. I heard from Gandalf that you travel from Mirkwood in the blink of an eye. Your gifts are remarkable. You flatter me, my lord. After the pleasantries, they spoke plainly. Gandalf told Elrond what Bjorn had reported and what he and Radagast had felt about the darkness at Dol Guldur. Radagast confirmed the tale. Elrond's face grew troubled as he listened. He did not share Saruman's skepticism, and so he believed them, and he agreed to go. But his manner grew more thoughtful. This is grave, he said slowly. Should we not inform Lady Galadriel and Saruman before we act? Gandalf considered, then nodded. We must tell them, he said. Yet Saruman does not share our means of swift travel. He will learn of our movements soon enough. It may be that he hears of our plans only when we arrive at Dol Guldur. Elrond accepted the answer. He knew too well the tension between Saruman and Gandalf. At the last council meeting, Saruman had opposed an investigation of Dol Guldur. Though Elrond and Galadriel had leaned toward Gandalf's concern, Saruman's will had prevailed then. The ties between Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, keepers of the three, were close. They could coordinate their own response. Duir offered another thought. Nal Gul and even the Master may be in Dol Guldur, he said. We should call more aid. Lord Glorfindel of Rivendell would be wise to include. Elrond hesitated. He would not commit for Glorfindel without asking him. Glorfindel was no ordinary elf. One of the few who had returned to Middle-earth by the will of the Valar, he bore a rare and revered presence. Still, when they inquired, Glorfindel accepted. He would go with them to root out the darkness. His agreement bolstered the party's confidence. Duir produced the remaining powder and explained its use again, demonstrating the clearest way to speak a destination and avoid mishaps. One by one they prepared, Elrond, Gandalf, Radagast, Duir, and Glorfindel, and Duir sprinkled the green dust into the hearth. Radagast's cottage, each voice called. With each cry the fire flared, and one by one they vanished, stepping through green flame and arriving back at the wooden house in Mirkwood, ready now to set their plan in motion. Chapter 84, Dol Guldur, releasing tomorrow. Dol Guldur stood at the southern edge of Mirkwood, an old fortress long left to ruin. Since the necromancer took up residence, however, a malignant power had settled over the place. Orcs, wraiths, and giant spiders swarmed its ruins. The stronghold had become a nest of darkness that none dared approach, until now. Dewey, Gandalf, Radagast, Elrond, and Glorfindel slipped into the wood around Dol Guldur under cover of Dewey's disillusionment charms. They threaded their way past the orc patrols and crept into the castle's hollow interior. The farther they went, the heavier the sense of evil grew. Their faces tightened with each step. "It seems we have been deceived all this time," Elrond said at last, drawing his elven blade. His voice was quiet, but every syllable carried the weight of warning. "The dark enemy has returned." Glorfindel drew as well, a long, brilliant sword veined with golden waves. The light that clung to him made him seem less a courtly lord than a warrior reborn. Gandalf and Radagast gripped their staffs. All five swept the empty halls with wary eyes. Nothing in the shadowed stone invited complacency. Gandalf was the first to act. He struck his staff hard on the flagstones and intoned, "Evil hidden here. I command you to reveal yourself." A searching halo of detection rippled outward, but the halls gave up no sign. Only dust, collapsed banners, and silence. The fortress might have seemed abandoned, but none of them were fooled. To cloak oneself against Gandalf's sight required a darker cunning than mere neglect. Gandalf concentrated, probing deeper. Then the air shifted. Cold fell over them like a shroud. Light dimmed until their breath showed as vapor in the gloom. An oppressive weight pressed against their chests, and a whispering chill threaded into their minds. From the void stepped 9 cloaked, armored figures, shadows in mail that drank the light. Where their faces should have been, there was only hollowness. Morgul blades glinted at their sides. The Nazgul had come. They were men no longer, once 9 kings of men who had taken rings of power from Sauron in the Second Age. Those gifts granted long life, and then turned them into shadows of will, slaves to the Dark Lord. Now they circled the fellowship, chanting in a dead tongue that attempted to gnaw at thought and heart alike. "You should not have awakened," Elrond declared. His blade sang as he moved, and his voice undercut the Nazgul's whispers. Glorfindel, too, shone with a fierce, sacred radiance, light like that of the ancient trees, barely contained amid the surrounding night. "Servants of Mordor, this is not your domain. Return to the unseen world." Glorfindel's brightness drove the Nazgul back, if only for a heartbeat. They recoiled, then surged forward with renewed fury. Gandalf, Elrond, Radagast, and Glorfindel each met 2 of the wraiths. The 9th, the Witch King of Angmar, bore down on Dewey. "We meet again, young wizard," the Witch King rasped from beneath his helm, a voice like wind through iron. "You will not escape this time." Dewey met him calmly and raised his wand. "Avada Kedavra!" he cried. The green flash slit through the Witch King's shape as if striking mist. The spell passed through the hollow figure and did nothing. A cruel laugh echoed from the dark helm. "Wizard," the Witch King said, "your spell is useless against me." He struck with his Morgul blade. Dewey parried and answered with a different kind of magic. "Expecto Patronum!" Silver light braided from the wand and took the form of a great owl, its feathers bright as starlight. The Patronus swept between Dewey and the Witch King, talons flashing. It dodged the Morgul blade and gouged at the wraith's shoulder. A bright wound opened where shadow should not have been. For a moment, the Witch King shrieked, a sound like metal being torn, and black energy leaked away from the cut. Yet the Witch King was not so easily undone. Morgul steel found its mark, plunging into the owl's side. The Patronus shrieked and dissolved into silver mist. The Witch King's hollow gaze fixed on Dewey. "I will pierce your heart and turn you into one of my servants," he promised. Dewey's face paled briefly, but he stood steady. He lifted his wand and let loose a cascade of golden notes that hung in the hall like living harmonies. The music swelled, elating and pure, and where it touched his companions, it stoked courage. Where it touched the Nazgul, it scraped light, discordant, unbearable, fraying their focus. Gandalf and the others pressed forward, the tide of battle tilting. "Expecto Patronum," Dewey called again. This time the charm answered with a Patronus of terrifying grandeur. From his wand burst an owl vast as a war eagle, wings beating silver light that carved into the darkness. Its talons knocked aside the Witch King's Morgul blade and seized him. The great owl bore the wraith aloft, and Dewey stepped forward with the divine spear Aeglos in hand. The spear gleamed like a shard of cold sun. United with the Patronus, Dewey drove Aeglos through the Witch King's shadow. The spear's light tore the hollow thing asunder. The The spirit that clung to the Morgul steel was rent and scattered, and the Witch King vanished like smoke in a gale. For a moment the hall held only the hiss of dying magic and the rapid breathing of those who remained. Dewey drew a steadying breath, and seeing his friends still locked with the other Nazgul, directed his mighty Patronus to strike again. Together, his magic and theirs surged outward, light against shadow, and for now, hope against the dark. Chapter 85. Remarks on the Launch Shelf Announcement. I didn't plan to write a launch announcement, but since so many other authors do one, it would feel strange not to. So here are a few words. Before I started this novel, my knowledge of Middle-earth was basically limited to watching The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit films. I was new to Kidian and had heard from other writers that writing fan fiction is the easiest way to get traction, so I decided to give it a try. While browsing the rankings, I accidentally came across the book Bringing an MC System to Middle-earth and was blown away. That inspired me to write my own Middle-earth story. I'm also a Harry Potter fan, so I toyed with the idea of merging the two worlds, tailoring them together, so to speak, and that's how this project began. I should be honest, this is my first time writing this kind of novel, and my skills are limited. I couldn't fully capture the original tone, and even crafting dialogue was a struggle at first. Before this version, I actually published another draft directly. After reading that MC Middle-earth book, I enthusiastically wrote and published, hoping an editor would pick it up. The result was predictable. I wrote 70,000 words and no editor accepted it, so I had to scrap it. I nearly gave up and planned to switch genres, but the map of Middle-earth on my desktop and the research I'd already prepared kept pulling me back. Reluctantly, I rewrote and decided to submit internally. Internal submission wasn't smooth either. I sent it to several editors and got only rejections or silence. Just as I was about to abandon the idea and move on, I received a reply from editor Ginger T. I was overjoyed and immediately contacted the editor to sign the contract. After many ups and downs, the book is now on the shelves. So, shamelessly, please consider subscribing. As for updates, because it went on the shelves relatively suddenly, I lost in the 4th round of PK, I don't have a large backlog. I can promise 10,000-word updates for the first 2 days after launch, and after that, a minimum of 6,000 words per update. It's not that I can't write more. I'm just painfully slow at typing. Thank you for your patience and support. Chapter 86. Demon Lord Sauron. Hogwarts Sign-in System, Dol Guldur located. Do you wish to sign in? Before Sauron even appeared, the system responded. Sign in. Dewey chanted silently, and the confirmation came back. Sign in successful. Congratulations on obtaining advanced dark arts revealed. A tome of dark arts materialized before him. Dewey's heart leapt. He hadn't expected such a prize. Even though this was not the time to study, he couldn't help glancing through the pages. Imperio, Crucio, Avada Kedavra, Fiendfire, and instructions for creating Horcruxes. The deeper he skimmed, the more shaken he became. This single reward cataloged almost every devastating dark art in the magical world. If he could master them, his power would change entirely. But one spell stood out as the immediate priority, Avada Kedavra. As one of the 3 unforgivable curses, it killed instantly, resisted every defense, and depended less on complex gestures than on pure, concentrated malice. The curse's potency hinged on the caster's hatred and magical strength. He had barely registered the words when a wave of oppressive darkness crashed down from all sides, threatening to crush them like a tidal surge. Gandalf slammed his staff into the ground and raised a vast barrier of holy light, protecting the group. The shimmering dome looked like a fragile bubble in a stormy sea, ready to burst at any moment. "I'll help," Radagast called. For the first time, he showed his power as a brown wizard. His staff shed another layer of holy light that reinforced Gandalf's shield. Glorfindel flared with blazing radiance, tearing a rent in the encroaching darkness and letting a rare shaft of sunlight pierce the dim sky. Elrond intoned in ancient Elvish and summoned a hurricane, wind howling through the castle cave to scour out any hidden enemy. He's hiding there. Elrond's keen gaze fixed on the tallest, most ruinous tower. The hurricane lashed at it. Dewey uttered a spell without hesitation. Exploding bolt. The blast, magnified by the winds, demolished the tower. As masonry and dust cascaded, something concealed within was revealed, a colossal column of red flame that coalesced into a vertical, fiery eye. You cannot defeat me. Darkness rises again. Your faint light is swallowed by shadow. A voice of pure malevolence, tempting, corrupting, spoke in a language older than the world. From that raging eye, the 9 Nazgul they had thought vanquished reformed, circling them like vultures. Within the eye's vertical pupil yawned a dark void, and from it a towering silhouette stepped forth, sending waves of black energy that slammed against Gandalf and Radagast's barrier. The shield groaned under the strain. The sky itself seemed to extinguish. Light fled as if devoured. Dewey felt the air thicken, pressure closing around his lungs. Voices rose in his ears, countless whispers promising power, urging surrender. He conjured his Patronus. The radiant figure blossomed beside him, a living bubble of warmth and clarity that let him breathe again as if surfacing after long underwater. Something warm rested against his chest. Dewey fumbled, pulling out the handkerchief Galadriel had given him. When he opened it, 5 strands of golden hair shimmered with a silver glow. He braided 2 strands into a bracelet with his wand and slid it onto his right wrist. The hair, suffused with the light of the 2 trees, instantly blocked the dark voices. His mind remained his own. They all pressed their aid. Gandalf and Radagast's barrier, Glorfindel's light, Elrond's wind. If it had been just Gandalf and Dewey, they would have been swallowed. Dewey relievedly judged how fortunate they were to have the 3 elves and the brown wizard with them. The fiery eye roared and flared higher. From its shadowed pupil, the tall figure stepped fully into view, an immense presence in jagged black armor, wreathed in smoke and flames. The evil around him chilled the blood. He has form? Radagast's voice was edged with disbelief and fear. Has he truly returned? Elves, do not be hasty, Gandalf said, grave. He cannot be wholly restored to flesh unless he has regained the One Ring. Elrond added quietly, decades ago, Thrain II, owner of the last of the 7 dwarf rings, was taken by orcs and imprisoned in Dol Guldur. I suspect Sauron used those dwarf rings to regain a portion of his strength. Sauron's presence alone unnerved them. As he drifted forward, his dark power drove the holy barrier smaller and smaller. With a brutal strike, it shattered. Gandalf and Radagast staggered, spent. Sauron, servant of Morgoth, the dark voice thundered, your opponent is I. Glorfindel surged with a blast of pure, blinding power. As a reborn Lord of the Golden Flower, his magic rivaled that of Amaya, one of the mightiest of the elves, and he met Sauron blade to shadow. Glorfindel, reborn of the elves, tell me, will you be reborn again if I slay you now? Sauron taunted in that ancient tongue. His words carried force that struck at Glorfindel, forcing the elf back and dimming the radiance that wreathed him. Meanwhile, Elrond found himself swarmed by the reconstituted Nazgul. They harried him, binding his movements and preventing him from aiding the others. The battle had turned, and the air thrummed with dark triumph. Sauron was not entirely whole. Gandalf's warning still held some truth, yet even a fraction of his power was enough to bend the battlefield towards shadow. Chapter 87, Avada Kedavra. Duir, lend me your flame sword. Gandalf bellowed as he staggered under a new assault from Sauron. Without hesitation, Dewey reached into his spatial pouch, drew a blade, and sent it spinning through the air. Gandalf caught it deftly. The moment he gripped it, the blade flared to life, burning like a tiny sun, blindingly holy and searingly hot. You cannot pass. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Udun. Back to the shadow. No evil spirit can pass my obstruction. Gandalf rose, the sacred fire of the sword cutting through the surrounding dark magics. The flame drove Sauron back, matching the malignant fires he hurled. Radagast rose as well, releasing a halo of pure light to join the fray. For a time the 3, Gandalf, Glorfindel, and Radagast, held the Dark Lord at bay. Shockwaves from their clash rocked the colossal fortress, bringing down great sections of the castle like splinters. Dewey, knowing he was the weakest of the group, did not charge forward. Instead, he commanded his Patronus, an owl, to harry the Nazgul. Lord Elrond, I'll hold the Nazgul. Go help Gandalf and the others, he called. Elrond understood the moment was fleeting. He shook off the Nazgul's assaults and rushed to reinforce the siege. That left Dewey alone facing 9 wraiths. The pressure on him spiked. The Nazgul were not particularly powerful in the conventional sense, But they could not be killed permanently. Their spirits reformed from the Eye of Mordor if driven off. Fortunately, Dui's Patronus, a form of white magic, constrained such creatures. He kept the owl darting in and out, distracting and skirmishing, denying them the time to coordinate attacks on the besiegers. The Nazgûl soon saw through his intent and split their forces. 5 of them kept the Patronus occupied, while the other 4 made a direct charge. Dewey braced with his spear, Eglos, ready for contact. Then, in an instant, 4 razor points shot from his pocket and flew true, too fast for the wraiths to react. The projectiles pierced through their spiritual forms. No! The Nazgûl screamed as the daggers tore through them. Their wraith bodies twisted, ruptured, and collapsed into explosions of dark smoke that blew outwards, toppling nearby battlements. These were the 4 blades Dewey had taken from the Barrow Downs, old Dunedain weapons forged and rune-engraved to wound the servants of Mordor. Struck by those blades, the Nazgûl's evil powers were dispelled. For a time, they could not be reconstituted by the Eye of Mordor. Relief washed over Dewey. The remaining 5 Nazgûl circled warily, eyes fixed on the daggers floating about Dewey, unwilling to close in. Sauron felt the losses like a wound to a body of which he was the head. The great eye swung toward Dewey, a malignant will pouring from it. "Young wizard," the eye whispered into his mind, "I know you. You slaughtered orcs once loyal to me. I perceive your hunger, for power, for dominion. Submit to me, and I will teach you to forge rings of power. I will grant you immortality, dominion over this world. Yield, and be my instrument." The voice slid over Dewey like oil, seductive and corrupting. The hair wrapped around his wrist began to glow, a ward that fought back and held his mind from total invasion, but still seeds of doubt and desire crawled into the edges of his thoughts. Anger and a bitter, desperate unwillingness to be used rose in him. The last, fraying strand of his reason clung on. Then a dangerous idea sparked. He had read the forbidden passages in Advanced Dark Arts Revealed. He knew how to turn corrupting feelings into weapons. If Sauron's influence was filling him with hatred and malice, he could funnel that very darkness back as an assault. Dewey raised his wand, letting the evil swell inside him. He breathed out all the rage and surrendered everything but a single sliver of awareness. The word came like a curse, like relief. Avada Kedavra! A flash of cold green erupted from his wand, a light full of annihilation and blight. It cut through the storm clouds and struck the Eye of Mordor like a curse. Sauron, in the midst of his struggle with Gandalf and the others, froze. Around him, the dark conjurations he commanded flailed and unraveled as if bereft of a conductor. A horrible keening filled the air as Sauron reeled, his grotesque armor contorted under an unseen blow. Elrond seized the moment. With the Dark Lord momentarily stunned, he drove his blade deep into Sauron's hollow helm. The towering figure shuddered, then dissolved into black mist and licking flame, retreating into the eye itself. The great flame of the eye dimmed, its webs of dark power slackened. Gandalf, Radagast, Elrond, and Glorfindel pressed their advantage, each strike forcing the eye to reel and shrink. Still, the eye's voice did not abate. Haughty and certain, it thundered, "You cannot defeat me." Darkness endures. It will return. Then it unleashed a raw spasm of demonic fire. The 4 besiegers were driven back by the force. The 5 remaining Nazgûl were drawn into the eye and fused with it, becoming part of its essence. From within that burning glare, ancient syllables spilled out, half chant, half declaration. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die. Inside the eye, the faint shapes of 9 rings of men and 3 rings of dwarves glimmered. The words closed like a claim. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. The 1 ring shall be mine. Chapter 88, Light of Eärendil. Light will drive out the darkness, and Middle-earth will be born anew, but there will be no place for you there. The voice came from behind them, and with it a sacred radiance that pushed back the shadow. "Lady Galadriel." Surprise and relief spread through the assembled ranks. Galadriel stepped forward, clad in white, moving with serene grace. Moonlight seemed to pour from her. The demonic flames shrank away as if scalded. The eye of Sauron saw her, its pupil contracting, and its hollow, cold voice deepened. "You always come at the wrong time." "No," Galadriel replied, stepping onto scorched earth as if the heat meant nothing to her. She advanced toward the maddened eye. "You have awakened in the wrong place. Sauron, servant of the Dark Morgoth, here you have no power. You have no name, no face, no form. Go back into the void where you belong." In her hand she raised a crystal phial that seemed to contain captive stars. From it a blinding starlight poured forth, the light of Arundel's star. This was the phial that held the radiance of a Silmaril, the same holy light that had once shone in the brow of Arundel as he sailed the heavens. Arundel, the father of Elrond, had borne a Silmaril forged by Fëanor, a jewel that trapped the radiance of the two trees. Its light became the guiding star of hope for Middle-earth. The Silmarils had been treasures coveted even by Morgoth, and their theft and pursuit had brought about the wars of the First Age. The little crystal at Galadriel's lips contained that ancient light. Under her full power, it erupted with the purest, most penetrating holiness. The phial's brilliance struck the eye like acid. Sauron's form writhed beneath it, as if corroded, and a terrible keening rose from the darkness. Cracks spidered across the eye, and a shriek rent the sky. "You will yet fall into darkness." When the smoke and ash cleared, the eye had shattered. From it a dark, red star-like spark streaked eastward, dragging a trail of sulphurous fire across the clouds. Sauron was broken once again, his form undone, his power blown apart, and his spirit fled, diminished and fleeing to the east. Galadriel, having poured forth so much of herself, staggered. Elrond and Gandalf were at her side in an instant, catching her before she collapsed into Gandalf's arms. The phial in her hand had dimmed to a faint glow. "Lady Galadriel, are you all right?" Gandalf asked, voice edged with concern. She managed a wan smile, but remained pale. Her eyes were fixed to the east, heavy with foreboding. "He is driven off, but his spirit lingers. He could return at any time." Glorfindel stepped forward to soothe the others. "This is a great victory," he said. "Sauron has been grievously harmed. His form is shattered, his power broken. Only a wisp of his soul wanders now. It will not be easy for him to regain strength quickly." Elrond's expression darkened. "Yet as long as the One Ring exists, Sauron can never truly be destroyed. He has fled east, likely to Mordor, to hide in his old lair. We must warn Gondor and keep watch over the land." Gandalf's eyes were already on the orcs that had once swarmed Dol Guldir's halls. With Sauron's defeat, they had scattered into the forest, but not in chaotic flight. Their retreat was ordered, directed toward the northeast, he observed. "That suggests someone is commanding them from beyond the field." His gaze found Duir, and worry clouded his features. "With Azog gone, it seems a new leader has risen among the orcs. That is not good news." Duir, for his part, seemed only half bothered by the wider stratagems. He looked instead at Galadriel's still shaken face, reached into a pocket of his cloak, and produced a small potion from his spatial pouch. "Lady Galadriel, I made this calming draught," he said. "Perhaps it will help." She accepted it without hesitation and smiled at him. The smile caught Duir off guard. He looked away, grateful and embarrassed at once, reminding himself that she had a husband. Galadriel examined the red vial with interest and drank it down in one swift swallow. The liquid was bitter, and for a moment she frowned, but the effect was immediate. A healthy color returned to her cheeks, and the pallor of exhaustion lifted. "Thank you, Duir. I feel much better," she said, surprise and gratitude mingling in her eyes. That same surprise rippled through the company. Ordinary folk needed only a few drops to recover. Galadriel had drained the whole bottle, and yet regained only some of her strength. Duir clicked his tongue inwardly. Even so, her recovery was unmistakable. Elrond's gaze toward Duir warmed. "Today's victory will be sung of in the epics," Elrond declared. "Wizard Duir, you played a great part. Had you not dealt that grievous blow to Sauron, wounding him so that his form could break, we might never have seen Lady Galadriel drive him out." The others murmured their agreement. In the field of battle, Duir's contribution could not be denied. They placed him among their ranks that day. Yet, beneath the gratitude, a shadow of caution lingered. Gandalf's voice was gentle but firm. "Duir, I say this out of concern. Do not let yourself be consumed by the dark arts. Seeking power is not in itself shameful, but let it not master you." The look that passed among them carried the same worry. The spell Duir had used, an Avada Kedavra-like incantation, had been steeped in the aura of the dark arts, Such a thing could not escape minds as keen as theirs. Duir had expected scorn or condemnation for using such means, yet what he received instead was a sober admonition. He met Gandalf's gaze and nodded solemnly. "Thank you for your warning," Duir answered. "I will be careful." He meant it. He knew the danger. The dark arts feed on hatred, greed, cruelty, negative passions that, if indulged, could corrode the soul and twist a person's nature. He understood, too, the visible toll it could take. Those who gave themselves wholly to such powers often grew gaunt and monstrous, their faces mirroring the corruption within, remembered even in the whisperings about the Death Eaters and the rise of one who had lost his shape. The elders around him had seen bright spirits led astray by the lust for dominance, and none wished to watch a comrade descend the same path. Their looks toward Duir, therefore, shifted from suspicion to a wary approval. They had fought together that day. They had turned back a terrible peril. They only hoped that the one who had helped them would remain among their friends, not one day become their enemy. Chapter 89, Catching Up. Neither of them was the sort to insist on a rigid black-and-white view of the dark arts. So, to Dewey and the others' surprise, Galadriel pressed the little crystal phial of Arundel's light into Dewey's hand. "Take it," she said. "The dark arts can corrupt a person's spirit and lead them astray," she continued. "Arundel's light will keep you grounded in the light and help you resist the dark. Lady, this is far too precious." Dewey hesitated. He had watched Galadriel use that very light against the Dark Lord Sauron. It was no small gift. Galadriel smiled in a way that allowed no refusal and tucked the phial into his palm. "Think of it as payment for the potion you gave me." "This, thank you, my lady." Dewey accepted the phial, feeling the weight of the favor. They did not tarry long in Dol Guldur. Radagast the Brown would return to his forest home and his unruly companionship of plants and animals. Elrond and Glorfindel, at Galadriel's invitation, prepared to remain in Lothlorien for a time to plan against Sauron. Dewey and Gandalf declined Galadriel's offer to stay. They wanted to catch up with Thorin and the dwarves. This time, Gandalf was not trapped in Dol Guldur as fate had once dictated, no waiting for rescue by the White Council, so their visit lasted only a few days. Judging by the route and speed of the dwarves' expedition, they probably hadn't even left Mirkwood yet. After farewells, Dewey and Gandalf accepted Radagast's peculiar conveyance, a sled drawn by great, springing rabbits. True to his reputation as a sort of chariot god of Middle-earth, Radagast urged the sled through the forest at a reckless speed, weaving narrowly between trees and sending Dewey and Gandalf into a chorus of nervous gasps. He left them safely at the old road and patted his chest in relief. "Phew, that was exhilarating. My old heart can't take another run like that," he wheezed. Gandalf smiled and straightened. "Come, we must hasten. I don't know where Bilbo and the others are, but I hope we can find them." Dewey thought for a moment. Thorin's company had first met the giant spiders in Mirkwood, then crossed paths with the elves of the woodland realm and been imprisoned by Thranduil. If that was the route they'd taken, they couldn't be far. Dewey pulled out the Palantir. "We could look in the Palantir and see where they are." Gandalf's face darkened. "The Palantir is not omnipotent, Duir. This forest has its master." He spoke with the seriousness of a man who knew both the stones and the woods. To look into that sphere here would be a provocation. If its master noticed, it would cause trouble. Dewey remembered how Gandalf had once sensed him when he used the Seeing Stone. He folded the Palantir away. The elves of Mirkwood were not a forgiving lot. Drawing the attention of their king would be foolish. They walked along the old road, the Elven Road, and both fell silent at the sight of sickly trees and air that smelled of rot and corruption rather than pine and earth. Their faces grew grave. "Be careful not to breathe too deeply," Gandalf warned, covering his nose with his sleeve. "This place is tainted by the dark arts. Too much of it can bring dizziness and hallucinations." He added, voice low and troubled, "I only hope the dwarves haven't inhaled too much of it and been led astray." Dewey sniffed and frowned. He waved his wand toward his face and cast a transparent bubble that enclosed his head, isolating him instantly from the polluted air. "Gandalf, do you want one?" "I would be delighted," Gandalf said with a spark in his eyes. Dewey produced another bubble for him. The bubblehead charm, Something Dewey had learned from the Book of Spells as a breathing aid for underwater use served admirably here. With their clear domes shielding them, they pressed on. They came to a broken stone bridge. Gandalf's expression tightened. "My fear may have been right," he muttered. "They couldn't cross here," Dewey said. "They must have found another way." Gandalf scanned the riverbank and soon found signs. Vines severed or used as improvised ropes, mud scraped with climbing marks. While Gandalf searched for evidence of Bilbo and the company, Dewey went down to the water's edge. He transfigured several bottles and filled them carefully with the river water. The river itself was foul, poisoned by the dark arts. The water could induce hallucinations and even immediate unconsciousness on contact. It was as perilous as any sleeping draught, and drowning under its influence was a real danger. Dewey was curious. The tainted water had potential uses, research, or perhaps a way to drug an enemy. He stowed the bottles in his pouch. "Duir, we must move," Gandalf called. "We need to find Bilbo and the others as quickly as we can." "All right," Dewey answered and waved his wand. "Reparo." The broken span knit itself back together as if the damage had never happened. They crossed and hurried onward, but beyond the bridge there were no recent tracks. Whoever had passed here had not returned to the old road. They had gone off somewhere else. Gandalf's worry deepened. Dewey tried to soothe him. "Don't be too alarmed. Maybe they took a side path. They could be ahead of us." "I have another means we might try," Dewey added. Gandalf looked up with a flash of hope. "What is it? Try it at once." "I've never used it before. I can't promise it will work," Dewey warned. He had read the spell in the Book of Spells, but never practiced it in the field. He steadied himself, pictured Bilbo, and followed the motions printed in the book. He pointed his wand and intoned, "Point me." A blue line of light shot from his wand tip and stretched away into the forest, vanishing into the green gloom. The thread of light angled northward, deeper into Mirkwood. Gandalf and Dewey exchanged a look. It wasn't a direct line toward the Lonely Mountain. It was off course. If the light's guidance was true, Thorin and company were lost. "Then we must follow it," Gandalf said with a long, worried breath. "Let us see where their missteps have taken them." They left the old road and plunged into the forest, following the wand's luminous thread. The trees closed over them, the canopy choked out the sky, light grew scarce, and the forest floor was littered with thick, sticky webs that sealed entire stretches of trail. "Spiderwebs," Dewey whispered, every muscle tensing. "Duir?" Gandalf asked. He had noticed the change in Dewey's demeanor. Dewey pointed to the thick veils of silk clinging to trunks and branches. "This is the lair of the giant spiders, Ungoliant's kin or their descendants, just as Radagast warned." Before he could finish, the woods answered with a rustling chorus, a wet, frapped scraping sound like limbs across bark. From the trees and from the earth itself, huge spiders crawled, spilling into the path around them. Dozens, then scores, eyes glinting, mandibles clicking, surrounded them from every side, watching with hungry, covetous intent. Chapter 90, Giant Spiders. They were surrounded. Hundreds of giant spiders loomed out of the trees in every direction. Gandalf's face tightened, and he drew Foehammer at once to meet them. The spiders were enormous, the largest almost the size of a small house, the smallest still over 2 meters tall, legs spanning several meters. Their bodies radiated a foul aura of dark magic. Each head was ringed with dozens of eyes, clustered into 2 great, glittering masses that threw off a dizzying, hallucinatory charm. Much of Mirkwood's sickness could be traced to these creatures. Descendants of Ungoliant, they were not only huge, but armored, venomous, and foul-breathed. The hallucinatory miasma that drifted through the forest came from them. Many trees had been blighted and poisoned, and countless creatures had been driven away or killed. The woodland realm elves had once ranged across all of Mirkwood, but the spiders' advance had pushed them back north of the old road. Now the spiders had crossed the old road and were creeping toward the elves' homes. Duir and Gandalf had one advantage. A bubblehead charm kept the toxic air from reaching them. The spiders' breath would not work, but the sheer number of enemies was still alarming. More worrying for Gandalf was Bilbo and the dwarves. Giant spiders were cunning, cruel, and capable of coordinated tactics. Sensing that a headlong charge would be risky, the spiders held their distance and began to fling thick, rope-like strands of web toward the pair, trying to weave a net to trap them. "Protego!" Duir shouted, and a shimmering barrier sprang up around him and Gandalf. The webs smacked against the shield and clung there, soon forming a ragged spider web over the barrier's surface. The spiders intensified their efforts, spitting out more silk until a vast tangle wrapped the barrier like a cocoon. Gandalf hefted Foehammer and brought it down against the webs, but the strands were remarkably strong and elastic. The hammer struck like a blade against a super-elastic rope and nearly rebounded. It took several furious blows before a single strand finally snapped. Duir flicked his wand. Defindo. To his surprise, the web absorbed much of the spell's force. Only a few threads split. The silk blunted magic to some degree. That intrigued him more than it frustrated him. He wanted to see what the material could stand. He pushed harder. Avada Kedavra! A green flash seared through the woven wall and tore a gap wide enough to step through. Duir's eyes gleamed. If these threads could resist even part of a cutting charm, woven properly, they might make superb protective clothing, blade-resistant, and perhaps partially immune to magic as well. If ever there were time, he thought, he could capture a few of these spiders to breed for their silk. There was no time for future plans. Duir no longer held back. Exploding bolt! A blinding flare of magic detonated outward. The shockwave leveled the spiders, felled trees, and flattened everything for hundreds of meters in a thunderous sweep. At the very center, a protective lattice of spells kept Duir and Gandalf untouched. Around them lay a ruined ring of shattered forest and steaming corpses. Gandalf breathed out, astonished and relieved. "Duir, your magic grows ever stronger. I feel more confident about our road to Erebor." Duir only shook his head inwardly. Ever since he had seen Gandalf and others clash with Sauron at Dol Guldur, whatever arrogance he had felt had cooled. Praise from a Maya should be taken lightly. He had no wish to be haughty before a being like Gandalf. He was, after all, a Maya himself. If their powers were unbounded, the world would suffer for it. He remembered the tales of the First Age. When the Valar launched the War of Wrath to free the Elves from Morgoth, the scale of destruction had been terrifying. Mountains had been rent, plains upheaved, and the northern lands of Beleriand were drowned. To prevent such devastation, the Valar imposed limits on any Maya who entered Middle-earth. That was why wizards like Gandalf and even Sauron could never wield their full might here. Perhaps, Duir mused, that was part of why Sauron fashioned the One Ring, to find a way around those limits. For now, Duir pushed such thoughts aside. He and Gandalf cast a guiding charm to the east and sent it toward the direction of Bilbo and the dwarves. Relief flooded them both when the reply came. Bilbo and the company had not been taken by the spiders. They had escaped and were nearby, walking past several spider corpses. Gandalf drew an arrow from one of the slain beasts and examined the fletching. "These are elven arrows," he said quietly. "Bilbo and the dwarves must have met the Woodland Realm elves." He did not look reassured. The Woodland Elves were different from other elves, guarded, proud, and not fond of strangers. Worse, their old enmity with dwarves was well known. If the elves had taken the dwarves in hand, things might go badly. A stir in the trees answered his worry. Figures flashed through the branches, moving with deer-like grace, and several elves sprang onto the high ground and into the trunks, bows at the ready, eyes narrowed and arrows trained on the two wizards. "Who are you? Why are you here?" demanded the one who stepped forward. He was tall and lithe, golden hair braided and thrown back over his shoulders, his features sharply handsome in the way elves tend to be. He wore a light brown cloak pinned with a brooch of green leaves, a sign Duir recognized at once. Gandalf raised a hand in greeting and smiled with the usual warmth. "Friends of the Woodland Realm, greetings. I am Gandalf the Grey." Duir inclined his head and answered plainly, "I am Duir, the black-robed wizard Duir." "Wizard?" The young elf's gaze slid over the two figures, pausing for a few seconds on the strange shimmering bubbles hovering above their heads. He spoke a sentence in Elvish to the others. The drawn bows immediately lowered. "I am Legolas, son of Thranduil." "Gandalf the Grey," Gandalf answered with a slight bow, the hem of his gray robe brushing the moss. There was warmth in his voice. "I have heard your name spoken often. It is an honor to be received so highly by the king of the Woodland Realm." He looked up at Legolas, eyes bright. Son of Thranduil, as keen as the forest itself, Mirkwood has clearly taught you well. The young prince gave a faint, shy smile and turned to the other wizard with curiosity. Some time ago, we captured orcs fleeing the Misty Mountains. From them we learned that Azog the Defiler was slain by a black-robed wizard. I take it that was you? If there are no other black-robed wizards wandering about, then yes, Duir said with a small smile. Legolas's wariness eased, though he still asked, "May I ask why you two have come into Mirkwood?" Gandalf, well aware of the strained relations between the woodland elves and the dwarves, did not say they were searching for dwarves. He cleared his throat. "We had intended to pass through Mirkwood on our way to Lake Town, but were set upon by giant spiders until your arrival." Legolas nodded. "In that case, please come with me. My father will want to see you." Gandalf and Duir exchanged a look and followed. It was an opportunity, too. Perhaps Bilbo and the others had fallen into elven hands. As they moved north, the dark taint on the forest thinned. The trees grew brighter, the air cleaner. In relief, Duir took off the strange bubblehead charms that had bobbed over them since they entered the woods. Most of the woodland realm were sylvan elves, woodland folk with dark hair, close to the trees and beasts, expert archers who blended with the forest. Yet the realm was ruled by a minority of Sindar. Thranduil and his son were of that line, their pale golden hair the most obvious mark of their kin. The woodland realm lay in northeastern Mirkwood, not far from the forest's edge. The forest river ran past its southern gate. Unlike the delicate, riverine halls of Rivendell, the woodland elves lived in a grand palace, hollowed into the hillside, cave chambers and tunnels opening into a maple-covered slope. The main entrance was set in the hill, flanked by two tall stone doors carved with elven runes, wards which made entering the halls easy, but leaving them difficult for an unwelcomed guest. They passed through the gate, winding down corridors, past checkpoints and silent sentries, until they reached a great hall. At its highest point, behind a throne carved of stone and set before a great rack of antlers, sat the Woodland King. Thranduil rose as they entered, tall and cool, wearing a crown woven of red leaves and winter berries. His robe was rich, his bearing regal and faintly aloof. "Mithrandir," he said, stepping down with a courteous smile. "Your Majesty Thranduil," Gandalf returned, bowing. Duir bowed as well. Thranduil's gaze swept to Duir and brightened. "A rare young wizard," he said, addressing him. "You must be the black-robed Duir who slew Azog. I have heard stories. White Bane, Troll Slayer, the Bane of Orcs. Quite the list of accomplishments." "The tales have been a touch exaggerated, Your Majesty," Duir replied, modestly shaking his head. "Nonsense." Thranduil waved away the protest. "There was that great explosion in the forest just now. My scouts found hundreds of yards of torn woodland and at least 100 giant spiders dead. That could only be the work of such a wizard." He beamed and gestured proudly toward his son. "You have surely already met Legolas. He is the finest marksman in Mirkwood, never misses a shot, and has slain countless spiders." Gandalf, obliging and adept at flattery, joined in the praise of Legolas with charming enthusiasm. Thranduil's smile widened. Praising his son pleased him more than compliments to himself. Legolas, embarrassed by the attention and Gandalf's compliments, reddened faintly. Thranduil ordered a banquet set in their honor. He sat at the head of the table. Gandalf and Duir were his guests, and Legolas remained at their side. They drank fine wines and ate well as soft music threaded through the hall. When cups had been refilled and conversation warmed, Thranduil asked, "Mithrandir, what business brings you through Mirkwood this time?" Gandalf kept the answer general at first. "We are bound for Lake Town." "Lake Town?" Thranduil's brow knit as he lifted his wine. He fixed both wizards with a narrow look. What attraction could there be in Lake Town to draw two wizards so far? Gandalf gave more of the truth. "The men there are descendants of those who fled the ruin of Dale at the foot of the Lonely Mountain. We mean to examine the mountain. There is a dragon there. If it wakes, it will be a grave danger." "So you travel in concert with Thorin Oakenshield?" Thranduil's expression turned cold. "You would help them reclaim the Lonely Mountain?" Gandalf opened his mouth to answer, but Thranduil cut him off, voice hardening. "They trespassed in my lands," he said bluntly. "They were taken and are in my dungeons." Gandalf tried to intercede, to plead or argue, but Thranduil would hear none of it. You and your companion are my guests, and the woodland realm welcomes you, he said. But if you intend to speak in favor of the dwarves, do not waste your breath. Gandalf fell silent. The king's meaning was plain. They were welcome so long as they did not attempt to rescue or defend Thorin and his company. Chapter 92. Sign-in for a flying broomstick. Dewey and Legolas were getting along surprisingly well. Unlike Thranduil's haughty chill, Legolas was gentle, reserved, perhaps, and still holding the usual elven mistrust of dwarves, but refreshingly open otherwise. At under 500 years old, he was young for an elf, and had rarely left Mirkwood. He admired Dewey for having killed Azog and asked eagerly about his past battles. As they talked, the system suddenly chimed into Dewey's mind. Hogwarts Sign-in System, location, Mirkwood. Do you wish to sign in? A ripple passed through Dewey's eyes. Sign in, he thought. Sign in successful. Congratulations, you have unlocked the flying broomstick manufacturing process. A flood of technical knowledge poured into him. Dewey felt a pleased thrill. He had just acquired the know-how to make a flying broomstick. With one, he could fly anywhere on a broom, sign in from the air, and enjoy an immediate tactical advantage. Most beings in Middle-earth couldn't take to the sky the way dragons or giant eagles could. He studied the instructions carefully. Making a flying broom shared much with wandcraft. Both required magical wood, but it was far more difficult. Beyond choosing and shaping the wood, polishing and tuning, broom-making demanded alchemical work as well. Even in ideal conditions, it would take at least a week or two. Still, Dewey was eager. There was enough leftover core wood from the wand he just had made to serve as the broom's shaft. He resolved to build a broom as soon as possible, ideally before they reached the Lonely Mountain. Then he could see who was faster, dragon or wizard. But he was currently at someone else's banquet and could not start immediately. He folded his excitement away and returned to the feast. Before the banquet ended, an elf guard hurried to Thranduil. "Your Majesty, the dwarves have escaped," he said in Elvish. Gandalf, who understood Elvish, brightened at the news but kept his expression polite out of respect for their host. Thranduil set his wine down, forehead creasing. "How did they get away?" "The dungeon keys were stolen. Someone freed them. They fled through the wine cellar trapdoor and are riding empty barrels down the underground river." Thranduil's face went dark. His eyes flicked between Gandalf and Dewey, suspicion written all over him, but he only snorted and rose. "The banquet is over. Capture those dwarves and bring them back. This time I will keep them until they rot." The guards acknowledged the command. Legolas joined the pursuit as one of the leaders. Only Dewey and Gandalf remained at the table. They exchanged a look. Should they stay or leave? Gandalf, with more nerve for such moments, bowed and took his leave. "If your Majesty has pressing business, we shall not intrude." Thranduil regarded them for a long moment, then dismissed them with a curt, "Go." They slipped out and made their way to the bank of the underground river. The current ran wild. Dewey and Gandalf watched it and wondered how the dwarves could be recaptured. "Do you know how to handle a boat?" Dewey asked. "Some," Gandalf admitted, "but I doubt the elves would lend one." Dewey didn't wait. He found a dead log on the bank and tapped it with his wand. The log swelled, widened, and elongated until it became a small wooden skiff for two. He tapped two nearby branches, and they hardened into oars. He took one and handed the other to Gandalf, who chuckled. "I had forgotten you could do that. Your magic is remarkably handy." They pushed off and drifted into the current. Wood elves watching from the trees gaped and quickly reported what they'd seen. Thranduil said nothing, but his wariness toward Dewey unmistakably sharpened. The river bucked their little boat. For a while, Gandalf's steady hands kept them from capsizing. After a short run, they came upon a battle on the bank. Elves versus orcs, corpses occasionally tumbling into the water, staining it dark. Dewey's brow tightened. Hadn't he already killed Azog? Why were orcs here at all? An orc on the far bank raised his bow, taking aim at an elf fighting another orc. Dewey didn't hesitate. He raised his wand and spoke, Avada Kedavra. The spell struck the orc, and he was instantly obliterated. The elf who'd been targeted, Legolas, glanced at Dewey, gave a small nod, and went back to his own fight. Dewey kept his wand moving as the boat drifted. He cut down orcs along both banks, answering threats before they could focus. "Dewey, watch your back," Gandalf warned sharply. Dewey spun and shaped a wall of ice behind them. An arrow laced with dark energy slammed into the barrier and lodged halfway through. Dewey's pupils narrowed. Morgul arrows, poisoned with the shadow. He scanned for the shooter and saw an orc mounted on a warg preparing another shot. "Avada Kedavra," he cried, only to see his rival's breath cut off before the words left his mouth. Legolas's arrow had flown truer. It pierced the orc in the throat. The orc toppled from the warg and plunged into the river. Dewey's spell struck the warg and tore it apart. Legolas gave them a brief, almost courteous nod and sprinted to intercept other assailants. Further downstream, Dewey's attention caught the sight of wine barrels bobbing in the current. Inside them, Thorin and his companions clung together, drifting helplessly as orcs on the shore gave chase and loosed arrows. The river was becoming a desperate gauntlet. Dew and Gandalf readied themselves. There was no telling what else lay around the next bend. Chapter 93, Imperious Curse Dewey, and Gandalf drifted down the Mirkwood River by boat, riding the current all the way to its mouth and into Lake Town. The town rose on an island where the Mirkwood River met the Running River from the Lonely Mountain. The Running River flowed eastward toward the Sea of Rune. Protected by stone bulwarks, the island was a bustling hub of trade. They found no sign of Thorin or the others as they approached. Dewey's wand cast a pale beam that cut through the mist. "Guide me," he murmured. The light pointed toward the heart of the foggy lake. "Bilbo and the others should have found a way across," Gandalf said. "That's good. Maybe we'll be able to meet in Lake Town." Before they could make landfall, a band of orcs who had pursued them down the river appeared at the river mouth. Once the current slowed the boat, the two of them became easy targets. "Shoot them dead!" The orc leader snarled in the black speech, and a storm of arrows descended. Dewey didn't panic. He flicked his wand and raised a shimmering barrier around them. Most of the arrows clattered harmlessly off the shield, but a handful ignored it and streaked toward Dewey's head. "Watch out! Morgul arrows!" Gandalf cried, slashing one of the projectiles in two with a single powerful swing of his sword. Dewey reacted instantly, bracing the heavy oar as a shield. Two Morgul arrowheads struck it dead on, black-tipped and wicked, driving into the wood. He hadn't expected the orcs to be so cunning, hiding Morgul-tipped bolts among the volleys so they could bypass ordinary defenses. Grim, Dewey abandoned the splintered oar and answered with a devastating counterattack. "Exploding bolt," he shouted. The orcs seemed ready. Shields plucked from their backs rose to meet the blast and took most of the force. The explosion sent many tumbling and left others battered, but the shields, made of some tough, unfamiliar material, kept most of them alive. Gandalf and Dewey exchanged a look. "Duir," Gandalf warned. "They've studied your tactics. They were prepared." Dewey nodded. "Let's get ashore. I need answers." They steered the boat for the bank, but the orcs renewed their assault. "Shoot! Shoot them dead!" their leader cried again. Then, in an instant, the orcs' bows and arrows seemed to shift and writhe, bows coiling into venomous serpents that lunged for throats and arms. The orcs panicked, dropping their weapons. The snakes collapsed and snapped back into the bows and arrows as if nothing had happened. Before they could recover, Dewey struck. He leapt from the boat to the riverbank, flinging spell after spell. Diffindo, Avada Kedavra, exploding bolt. The sounds of impact and shattering filled the air. Dozens of orcs fell, dead or grievously wounded. The rest began to scatter. The orc leader tried to flee, but Dewey froze him in mid-step with a crisp Petrificus Totalis. After the others were dealt with, Dewey approached the bound orc leader and released the paralyzing charm. The moment the leader could move, he drew a dagger laced with a dark arts aura and lunged. With a crack, Dewey blasted him back, throwing him hard into a boulder. "Trying to kill me?" Dewey said coldly, stepping closer. The dagger's malign presence made his skin prickle. With a casual flick of his wand, he severed the arm that held the blade. The orc howled, glaring with furious hatred even as blood spurted. Dewey let the severed limb fall. The dagger hovered from the stump, obedient to some old foul enchantment, and pressed cold steel against the orc's throat. "Answer me," Dewey said. "After Azog's death, who leads you now? Why do you still hunt the dwarves? Tell me, and I'll let you live." The orc leader sneered despite the knife at his neck. A cruel laugh twisted his face. "Wizard, you'll never know. My master has plans already. Whether you or the dwarves, burning flames will take you all." Gandalf strode up, furious. He slammed the butt of his staff into the orc's shoulder and pinned him to the rock. "Tell me what you know, or I will cleanse you with the fire of light," he warned, voice hard as steel. Pain creased the orc's features, but his defiance only hardened. "Ha! You won't break me. Our time has come. War will sweep the land. We will triumph." Gandalf raised his staff to strike again, but Dewey stopped him with a calm hand. "Gandalf, he won't talk. We'll try another way." Dewey leveled his wand at the orc and concentrated, channeling a dark and precise intent. Imperio. Gandalf's expression tightened at the name of the unforgivable curse. He glanced at Dewey with concern, then fell silent, trusting his friend to know the measure of what he did. Dewey's voice held nothing as he reinforced the spell. Imperio reached into the orc's mind like cold fingers, overriding will and bending him into a puppet. Imperio was a dangerous thing. It did not kill outright like Avada Kedavra, nor rend the body as Crucio might. Its horror lay in the theft of free will, forcing a person to act against their nature, even to harm loved ones. There was no simple counter-curse. Only an iron will could break it from within, or the caster's death could sever the control. Otherwise, the spell could hold indefinitely. Under the curse, the orc's eyes went empty. Dewey pressed, voice low and unyielding. "Who is your new leader?" For a heartbeat, the orc resisted. Then the vacant answer came. "Bolg, son of Azog. He is our new king." Chapter 94, Lake Town. When the orc leader finished speaking, Gandalf and Dewey exchanged startled looks. They had not expected Bolg, Azog's son, to so swiftly dominate the orc ranks and take his place. Orc leadership was not hereditary, it was seized by strength. For Bolg to inherit Azog's position so quickly meant he must be at least as strong as his father. Dewey pressed on. "Did Bolg send you to hunt us? Is this about avenging Azog?" The orc answered without hesitation. "Partly. Bolg is furious over Azog's death. He's put a price on the heads of Thorin Oakenshield and the black-robed wizard Duir." Gandalf frowned in confusion. Azog was killed by Duir, no surprise there, but why target Thorin as well? The orc shrugged. "Bolg wants to stop Thorin from becoming king under the mountain. He plans to seize the Lonely Mountain and then push north into Angmar. If he controls the mountain, he can avoid the passes of the Misty Mountains and strike west directly." Gandalf's brow deepened. "Does Bolg really think he can take the Lonely Mountain? He must know a dragon dwells there." "Or perhaps he has an alliance with the dragon," Dewey added, voice tight with concern. The orc nodded. "The dragon of the Lonely Mountain has awakened. Bolg has made terms with him. If we prevent the dwarves from reclaiming the mountain, if Thorin dies, the dragon will allow us passage north and help us regain Angmar." Gandalf started. The color drained from his face. "We must stop Thorin and his company at once. If that dragon is awake, going to the Lonely Mountain will be suicide." Dewey was equally surprised. He had known of Smaug's slumber. The alliance with the orcs after Azog's death was a dangerous, unexpected turn. He could already foresee how Thorin would react. Reclaiming the mountain was the dwarf's obsession. He would not be easily dissuaded, even by the knowledge that a dragon guarded it. "Gandalf," Dewey said, trying to be practical, "there is still time before Durin's Day. We should go to Lake Town and meet Thorin's company there. We'll talk to them and try to stop this." Gandalf nodded reluctantly. Then his eyes fell on the orc leader, still under Dewey's Imperio. He reached for his sword, Foehammer, as if to end the matter. Dewey stopped him with a quick shake of the head and a crooked smile. "Not yet. He's useful." "Useful?" Gandalf asked. Dewey explained. "He's bound by my Imperio. If we release him, he can return to Bolg's ranks and feed us information. At the right moment, if there's an opening, he could even strike Bolg when he least expects it." Gandalf's face lit with the possibility, but concern lingered. What if he breaks free? If Bolg learns of it, he'll grow suspicious, and the whole thing could blow up. Dewey was confident. Imperio has no simple counterspell. Only an extremely strong will could snap it, or a powerful mage, someone like Sauron, could force it off. Short of that, it's hard to detect and harder to break. Gandalf sheathed his sword, eased by Dewey's assurance. They released the orc, commanding him to go back and act as their eyes and ears among Bolg's forces. If he could end Bolg, all the better. But that was wishful thinking. They left the orc to his grim duty and continued on, rowing a small boat through the drifting mists of the lake, guided by Dewey's spell. At last they reached Lake Town. an island settlement of wooden houses built on stilts over the water. Boats, rather than carts or horses, were the town's roads. Most people there lived by fishing. Trade with the wood elves of Mirkwood was controlled by a wealthy few under the master of the town. When their boat nudged toward the quay, a disheveled middle-aged man in a stained brown hat came out of a house and hailed them sharply. "Hold your boat! Who are you?" Dewey exchanged a glance with Gandalf. This one was Gandalf's turn to speak. "Good evening. We're travelers from the west, only passing through, hoping to rest for a few days." The man eyed them with suspicion. "From the west? Papers? Goods?" Gandalf spread his hands. "No papers, no cargo, just this little boat." The man looked at their empty boat and grunted. "No goods means no declaration, but you'll still owe a docking fee." "How much?" "1 silver coin." Gandalf looked to Dewey. The gray wizard had little coin on him, but Dewey was not short. He fished 2 silver coins from his purse and tossed them over. The man deftly caught them. His face brightened at the extra coin. "Anything else you need? Has anyone else come through before us?" Dewey asked, fishing for news as he paid. The promise of coin thawed the man's wariness, and he answered eagerly. "A party of dwarves arrived not long before you. They were taken to Bard's house." Dewey and Gandalf exchanged quick, relieved looks. "Thank you. That's very helpful." The man swung open the gate and let them through into the watery lanes of the town. At Bard's house, the mood was tense. Keeley, the youngest of the dwarves, had been struck in the leg by a Morgul arrow. Though the shaft was pulled free, the dark venom and sorcery on its tip had already spread. Only the stout constitution of the dwarves kept him from slipping away. Ordinary medicines were useless against such dark blades. It had taken Toriel, the wood elf who had tracked the company, and the herb Kingsfoil to staunch and heal the wound. Without her, Keeley would surely have died. Their weapons had been confiscated by the Elves of Mirkwood, leaving the dwarves weaponless and desperate. They argued in urgent, hushed voices about how to obtain new arms and press on to the lonely mountain. Their heated discussion was cut short by a sudden knock at the door. Everyone in the house went still, alert and wary. Bard went to the door and opened it. There, on the threshold, stood Gandalf, and beside him Dewey. "Looks like we arrived just in time," Gandalf said with a tired half-smile. "Gandalf!" came a chorus. Bilbo's face lit up. He ran forward and threw his arms around their legs, full of relief and joy. The dwarves inside the house, startled at first, broke into pleased surprise at the sight of the two wizards. Chapter 95, The Dragon-Slaying Black Arrow. Duir and Gandalf's return brought a ripple of surprised relief through the room. Even Thorin Oakenshield, who rarely showed joy, allowed a small lightening of his face. Since the two had briefly left the company, everyone had suffered in Mirkwood, first losing their way in the poisonous haze, then stumbling into the lairs of giant spiders and barely escaping being eaten, only to be captured by the elves and imprisoned. They had fled the dungeons, been pursued by elves, and hunted by orcs. The whole journey had become a string of narrow escapes. It was nothing like the safer days when Duir and Gandalf had been with them. Thorin walked up to the pair, as if to banish the memory of that separation with a single welcome. "Welcome back, Duir Gandalf," he said solemnly. "With you two, I believe our journey to the Lonely Mountain will surely be smooth." Gandalf's face remained grave. "I'm afraid the expedition ends here, Thorin." The words dropped like a stone. The room went silent. Thorin's smile froze and his expression hardened, his eyes pinched on Gandalf. "What do you mean, the mission ends here?" he demanded. Gandalf looked at the faces around him, saw astonishment and hope dimming, and sighed. "We have received accurate reports from the orcs. The great dragon in the Lonely Mountain has awakened and has joined forces with Bolg, son of Azog. If we go to the mountain now, it will be like lambs walking into a tiger's den. We would be marching to our deaths. The plan to steal the Arkenstone and gather the dwarves is no longer viable. We must rethink everything." A heavier quiet fell. The dwarves looked as if the ground had been pulled from beneath them. Even the Lonely Mountain's forces, at full strength, would struggle against an awakened dragon. What chance did this ragged company of a dozen or so have? Thorin's face showed the blow, then burned with a rising, stubborn fury. "No, I will not give up," he snapped. "If the dragon has awakened, I must have the Arkenstone, at any cost." He muttered, almost to himself, We could split in two. One party would distract the dragon at the front gate, lure it out, while the other slips in the back and takes the Arkenstone. Are you mad? Gandalf interrupted sharply. Do you not see what provoking a dragon will bring? It will scorch everyone to ashes, your companions, the people of Lake Town. Its revenge will be terrible. Thorin's eyes glittered with a hard light. War always demands a price. His companions stared, stunned. The dwarves themselves could hardly believe the words. Gandalf's anger flared. He gripped his staff as if to shake some sense back into Thorin. The tension built until Duir stepped forward. Enough, he said. There's still more than a month until Durin's day. Let's calm down and think this through. Balin, the elder dwarf, nodded. That's right. We have time. We can replan and find another way. Bard, as host, urged everyone to sit. Gandalf and Thorin sulked at opposite ends of the room, one puffing his pipe, the other brooding in silence. Bilbo and the dwarves exchanged uneasy looks and kept quiet. Duir's attention, however, turned to Bard. In his own story, Bard had been the one to slay Smaug, a descendant of Girion, former lord of the ruined town beneath the Lonely Mountain. He now lived as a humble man of Lake Town, a ferryman and trader. When Smaug had descended on the mountain, Girion's town had been destroyed. Girion had once fired a great black arrow that struck Smaug, and that same black arrow had been handed down to Bard. Duir scanned the room and saw a black iron arrow mounted on the wall. It was massive, more like a harpoon or spear than a hunting arrow, well over 2 meters long. He walked over and studied it. The metal was dull and heavy, forged of some unknown alloy. Nevertheless, it was the only weapon anyone spoke of that could pierce a dragon's scales. May I? Duir asked as he reached for it. Bard had noticed him and came over, puzzled. You know of it? Duir nodded. I've heard. They say it was wrought by the dwarves to oppose dragons, one of the few things that can find a chink in their armor. Bard's smile turned rueful. If it truly made dragons helpless, my father's town would not have perished. My ancestor did fire it at the beast, but Smaug endured. Girion burnt in the flames. He cast his eyes down over the black shaft. Duir remembered more. Girion's arrow had torn a scale from Smaug's chest, creating the very weak spot that later allowed Bard to kill the dragon. The room had gone quiet again, and Balin was first to react. You are a descendant of Girion? He exclaimed. No wonder you look familiar. There is something of him in your face. Bard shrugged a tired smile. I'm only a fisherman now. Thorin, long silent, rose abruptly and fixed his gaze on the arrow. Greed and excitement lit his features. Is that the black arrow, a thing that can slay a dragon? Gandalf immediately cooled him. Only a possibility, and a slim one. Thorin Oakenshield, do not expect to kill a dragon with that. Dragons are cunning. They will not stand still waiting to be struck. If you have no clear chance for a lethal blow, you will only bring the dragon's wrath upon yourselves and others. Thorin would not be moved. His look became almost fanatical as he regarded the weapon. No, this is fate. Fate has shown us this arrow so we may fulfill what we set out to do and slay the dragon. He turned to Bard. How much for it? Bard blinked. What? I'll buy it, Thorin said, implacable. You are of Girion's line. You know the treasures inside the Lonely Mountain. Give me the black arrow and I will give you 1/14 of the mountain's hoard. Bard's face hardened. I'm sorry. It is an heirloom. It is not for sale. Chapter 96. Professor McGonagall's Notes. When Thorin asked Bard to trade for the black arrow, Bard felt the temptation keenly. Tales said the Lonely Mountain's hoard was piled higher than men could imagine, gold enough to change a life, enough to rebuild Dale and restore his family's glory. If he could claim even a 14th of it, Lake Town would prosper for generations. But Bard set the arrow down and shook his head. I won't risk the people of Lake Town, he said. If the dragon survives, it will burn us all. We'd be inviting its revenge straight into our homes. Thorin's face hardened at the refusal. He stared at the black arrow for a long moment, then snorted and went back to his seat without another word. The hall fell cold again. Gandalf watched Thorin with growing unease. Meanwhile, Dewey ignored the politics and busied himself with the little device that blinked to life in his hand. Hogwarts Sign-in System, Lake Town detected. Sign in, Dewey said. Sign in successful. Congratulations, you have obtained Transfiguration Master Minerva McGonagall's Transfiguration Notes. A thick notebook shimmered into being. Dewey's eyes lit up. McGonagall's notes. He could hardly believe his luck. He flipped through them impatiently, then sat in a corner and read until the margins blurred. The book was a compendium, precise transfiguration routines, methods for turning objects into animals and back, techniques for altering elements, condensing flame into a giant python or even a dragon, animating statues to fight alongside you. There were entire sections on human transfiguration, including animagus work. For an animagus in training who took the form of a tabby cat, the notes on pitfalls and troubleshooting were priceless. Dewey cradled the notebook like a treasure. He already had a mandrake leaf tucked under his tongue, waiting for the next full moon so he could take the next step in his animagus training. That moment would come soon. In the meantime, he decided to use the downtime to build a flying broom. Outside the house, the conflict between Gandalf and Thorin only deepened. Gandalf pleaded with Thorin to abandon the journey to the Lonely Mountain. Thorin grew steadily more stubborn, determined to reclaim the Arkenstone no matter the cost. He went to the Master of Lake Town, seeking arms from the town's stores to outfit his company. He remembered the black arrow in Bard's home, an arrow said to pierce dragon scales, and tried, through pressure and bribery, to take it from Bard. The Master of Lake Town was a greedy, short-sighted man. When he heard of treasure, he saw only profit. Why worry about a dragon when the armory's weapons could be outfitted at no immediate expense and, if the expedition succeeded, would yield boundless wealth? He agreed to supply arms at once and even planned a grand farewell for the dwarf warriors. Gandalf was helpless to stop it. Dewey paid little mind to all of this, spending his days at Bard's house. He sat carving and polishing the heartwood of a willow with a keen dagger until the wood gleamed. One evening, Gandalf came to him, his face pinched with concern. "Duir," Gandalf said, using the name he favored, "things haven't gone the way I hoped. I'm worried." "It's not only the dragon," he continued. "There's something else. Thorin's kin have the dragon sickness in their blood. The closer they get to the mountain and its treasure, the more the madness takes hold of them. I fear that by the time they touch the hoard, he'll be consumed from within before the dragon ever reaches them." Dewey listened. He admired Gandalf's selflessness, and yet felt useless. Gandalf was doing everything he could, talking, pleading, trying to divert the company, but to Thorin, those attempts looked like interference. So Thorin went over Gandalf's head and struck his deal with the Master. "If I were Gandalf," Dewey said slowly, "I wouldn't keep trying to persuade him. Some men can't be talked out of what they want. If it comes to it, you could knock him out and keep him quiet until after Durin's day." Gandalf's eyebrows rose, then he shook his head. "I would not use force to change a man's will. That is not our way. Even with the best intentions, coercion leads to worse things, greater ruin than the one we try to avert." He glanced at the object in Dewey's hands. "Are you making a broom?" Dewey nodded, then laughed. "A flying broom, a means to travel." Gandalf's eyes brightened. Flight was a temptation few could resist. He had the great eagles to call on, but being carried and soaring under your own power were very different experiences. He crowded around Dewey, watching the broom take shape with growing excitement. Before the broom could be finished, Bard burst into the room with urgent news. "The dwarves have left by boat," he panted. "They're already on their way to the mountain." "And the hobbit went with them." Gandalf's calm broke. "They left without telling us? Thorin Oakenshield would lead them to death." He grabbed up his staff, ready to set off. Dewey refused to come with him. He shook his head and pointed at the unfinished broom. "Give me a few days. The broom will be ready, and then we can fly and catch up." Gandalf hesitated only a moment. He could not sit still. "No, I must go now." He borrowed a boat from Bard and pushed off, determined to overtake the company by water. Dewey remained behind, a guest in Bard's house, hands already returning to the willow core and McGonagall's notes, the mandrake leaf under his tongue, and the full moon on the way. Chapter 96. Flying on a Broomstick. Duir had taken to Bard's household easily. Bard was welcoming, his 2 children were sweet and trusting, and Duir, always generous, had even produced a few beautiful trinkets from his spatial pouch to give to them. 3 days had passed since Thorin, the dwarves, and Gandalf left, and in that time Duir had finished his first flying broomstick. The handle had been carved from the heartwood of an ancient willow, hard as stone but smooth and pale as jade. Flowing lines ran along its shaft, and a lattice of runes had been carefully engraved into the wood so subtly that a faint current of magic hummed beneath the surface. The tail was split into countless fine twigs from the remaining wood, trimmed to a precise, streamlined balance. Eager, Duir set the broom beside his foot, reached out, and said, "Up!" At first, the broom only rolled on the ground. He repeated the command with firmer voice. "Up!" Arp whoosh, it leapt free and landed, as if by its own will, into his hand. Duir felt his smile widen with both excitement and pride. Naturally, the next thing was to test it. He went out in front of Bard's house, straddled the broom, pushed lightly with his feet, and felt it lift him. He floated slowly at first, supported by an invisible cushion of air beneath him that made the ride comfortable, like sitting on a saddle. Bard and his 2 children spilled out to watch, mouths open. Bard's youngest, after the shock passed, bounced with excitement and wished he could try it too. For a first flight, Duir could not contain himself. He leaned forward and shot off like a rocket. "Ah!" he cried, careening wildly, one moment soaring high, the next nearly clipping a rooftop. Lake Town's residents, drawn by the commotion, craned out of windows and doorways. When they saw who it was, the strange guest staying with Bard, they were stunned. That someone could fly. The master of Lake Town, who narrowly escaped having his roof struck, peered angrily out his window. Greedy and short-sighted as he was, he had the wisdom to regret not having brought such a remarkable guest under his own roof, instead of letting Bard benefit. Duir, however, was oblivious to their reactions. He wrestled the broom into a semblance of control and eventually landed with a clumsy skid in front of Bard's house. Seeing the children's envious faces, he laughed and promised he would take them for a ride another day. After a proper farewell to Bard, he mounted again and set off toward the lonely mountain. He thought briefly of Bard's black arrow, old, famed as the only weapon known to pierce a dragon's scales, and considered taking it along to face Smaug. But Duir put the idea aside. He carried Aeglos, a divine spear whose penetration had been legendary, the same spear the Noldor king Gil-galad had once used to wound Sauron. Duir trusted its power, matched if not exceeded that of the Black Arrow. He left Bard's arrow with him, let the archer have a chance to test his fate. The speed of a flying broomstick depended on craft and skill. Wizards spoke in terms of cleansweep, comet, nimbus, and the fastest, firebolt. But though Duir had learned the making, he was still a novice. His broom was, therefore, slower than the slowest of those famed models. Even so, it was swift enough. He caught up to Thorin, Gandalf, and the dwarves, who had departed 3 days earlier, in just half a day. What had happened in those 3 days was not certain, but Gandalf had not won Thorin over. The king, under the mountain, remained determined to march on the lonely mountain, and Gandalf continued to travel with him. When Duir showed up as a distant black dot in the sky, Gandalf spotted him and could not help smiling. "Ah, our last member has finally caught up." Everyone turned to see what Gandalf was looking at. As the tiny shape grew larger, it became unmistakable. "Duir," they exclaimed. Bofur rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "By Allah, am I still dreaming? Duir, on a broom?" Duir eased himself down, landing with a slight bounce. "Hello," he called with a grin. Gandalf strode forward, pulled him into a warm hug, and then his gaze snagged on the broom. "You made this already? How does it feel to fly?" he asked, eyes bright. Duir laughed and offered the broom. "Feels fine. You should try it." Gandalf's face lit up. He snatched it like a child at a toy. "Then I won't be polite," he announced delightedly. While Gandalf took the broom for a quick turn, Duir greeted the company. Bilbo's relief at seeing him was apparent, but so was something like guilt. The hobbit had left Lake Town with the dwarves under compulsion of the signed contract, and, more importantly, because he believed the ring he carried would allow him to steal the Arkenstone from beneath Smaug's nose. Bilbo had not had the chance to tell Duir and Gandalf before he left. The sudden departure had weighed on him. But Duir, unconcerned, clapped Bilbo on the shoulder. Friends did not need permission to act. Duir had grown fond of the dwarves in their time together, save for Thorin. Balin was the eldest and the most thoughtful, a steady-minded counselor. Fili and Kili, though nephews to Thorin, were youthful and friendly, Beaufort, rotund and easygoing, was their joker and comforter. The others had their openly bright qualities too. Thorin, however, remained a puzzle to Duir. Thorin approached, his greeting cautious and edged with suspicion. "Welcome back, Duir," he said. "I trust you have come to aid us in reclaiming the mountain, and not to try to persuade me to give up, as Gandalf does?" Chapter 98, River Valley City. Faced with Thorin's lingering doubts, Dewey kept his demeanor cool. "I promise to help you retake the Lonely Mountain," he said. "I won't go back on that." Whether he lived to see it through was another matter. Dewey didn't pretend to control fate. He had only pledged to help reclaim the mountain, not to survive every danger along the way. Thorin didn't catch the implication. He smiled, relieved. "Good. Once the Lonely Mountain is ours, you'll receive your 10th of the treasure and the friendship of Durin's line." A shout of surprise cut through the air. With a whoosh, Gandalf launched himself into the sky on a flying broom, looping and diving with such agility and speed that he might have been a champion Quidditch player. The old man's movements belied his years. He flew with the freedom and joy of a child who has found a new toy. Watching him, Dewey felt a prick of envy so sharp he thought his ribs might split. He hadn't even shown Gandalf how to ride a broom, and yet the wizard had mastered it and flown better than Dewey himself. Gandalf circled once, twice, still not satisfied, before gliding down to land. "Ha! This broom is marvelous," he declared. "With it, I could go anywhere in Middle-earth." "If you like it," Dewey said, smiling, "I'll make you a broom of your own when we finish the journey to the Lonely Mountain." Gandalf's eyes brightened. "And I'll make you a staff like no other, Duir, and teach you a little trick of mine." He winked conspiratorially when he said it, and Dewey's curiosity flared. As a Maya, Dewey suspected any skill Gandalf called little would be anything but ordinary. Gandalf, however, kept the secret for now. Bilbo and the dwarves stared at the broom with eager eyes. Dewey let them try, but none of them had the spark of magic to activate it. They could not fly it themselves, though Gandalf was more than willing to be the pilot. One by one, with exclamations and laughter, Killy, Fili, Balin, and the others mounted Gandalf's makeshift aerial taxi for a taste of flight to River Valley City. Dewey climbed on too, and promptly regretted it. Gandalf's piloting was wilder even than Dewey's own worst impulses, recklessly fast, testing the broom's limits. Dewey kept expecting the handcrafted broom to fall apart beneath them, but it stayed whole. Only when Gandalf returned with the last heaviest dwarf, Beaufort, wobbling with the strain, did Dewey allow himself a quiet, relieved breath. Thanks to the broom, they arrived at River Valley City sooner than expected. The town lay at the foot of the Lonely Mountain. They were finally close. The moment Dewey's foot touched the ground, the Hogwarts Sign-in System chimed. Hogwarts Sign-in System, River Valley City located. Sign in? Dewey's heart gave a small leap. Sign in. Sign in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the wizard's oath. He opened the book with curiosity. It was a compendium of contract magics, binding spells, vows, and pacts. It described the unbreakable vow, a magic that forces the vow-taker to keep their promise under mortal peril of magical retribution, the Fidelius Charm, which hides a secret in the soul of a secret keeper so completely that no one, not even a potion or mind magic, can find it unless the keeper reveals it. And the Blood Pact, a deeper, odder magic that linked souls and power. Dumbledore and Grindelwald had once made such a pact, the text noted, a covenant of shared life and death. Dewey felt a thrill at the possibilities. Contract magic wasn't offensive, but it was powerful and useful in ways that brute force could never match. For a mad second, he considered forcing Thorin into a contract so the dwarf would never dare cheat him when the dragon sickness took hold. Then he laughed inwardly. That would be messy and unnecessary. If Thorin tried to renege on their agreement, he would soon learn how unwise it was to cross a wizard. With the new compendium added to his studies, Dewey set to work poring over it. They did not march immediately on the mountain. Dewey used magic to repair a house in River Valley City where everyone could stay. Durin's Day was still days off. Elrond's reading of the map had shown the way. They needed to reach the back entrance to the mountain on Durin's Day, and when the last ray of light fell across the keyhole, the back door could be opened. Until then, they planned and prepared. Gandalf refined Thorin's course battle plans as gently as he could. The objective was singular and delicate: steal the Arkenstone without waking Smaug. No open assault, no clashing of axes that would draw the dragon's wrath. If the Arkenstone could be obtained unnoticed, Thorin could present it and claim his kingship, rally the clans, and gather forces for a proper assault. The problem was obvious. Smaug was awake and keenly aware of intruders. He was especially sensitive to the scent and presence of dwarves and men. That made Bilbo, a hobbit and thus unknown to the dragon, the only plausible thief. By stealth rather than strength, Bilbo might reach the horde. Gandalf argued against it. The dragon was already stirring. Its senses were sharpened. Even a hobbit's stealth might not be enough. Sending Bilbo would be little different from sending him to his death. And then Bilbo volunteered. Gandalf fell silent. Chapter 99. Animagus. Bilbo, are you sure you want to do this? Dewey asked, his voice tight with worry. He hadn't expected Bilbo to volunteer so readily. The dragon has woken. It could be lying in wait. If you go in there, you could be in terrible danger. You could even die. Bilbo only smiled and slipped one hand into his pocket. Isn't that what I'm here for? He said brightly. My luck's always been good. Maybe I'll find the Arkenstone right away and never even see the dragon. Gandalf's expression was full of regret. He had misgivings about involving such an innocent hobbit in this. Bilbo's confident cheer did nothing to ease him. Dewey, watching that hand disappear into the pocket, frowned slightly. There was more to Bilbo's assurance than bravado. Was he relying on something else, something he kept tucked away? Still, Bilbo had decided, and there was no point arguing further. But Durin's day was still days off. First came the night of the full moon, and Dewey had other business to attend to. He took from his mouth the mandrake leaf he had kept beneath his tongue for a month and placed it in a small crystal vial of his own saliva. Under the moonlight, he added a single strand of his hair, then a silver teaspoon of dew he had collected in Mirkwood, dew taken from a place that had seen neither sunlight nor human footsteps for 7 days. Finally, he dropped in the pupa of a death's head hawkmoth. All that remained was to hide the vial in a quiet, dark, undisturbed place until a thunderstorm struck, then dig it up and drink it in one gulp to complete the last step of the animagus transformation. Of course, thunderstorms are unpredictable. Waiting could mean days, weeks, even years. The difficulty of becoming an animagus often comes down to luck. Dewey, however, had a plan. If the mountain wouldn't bring the storm, he'd take the vial to a place it did, somewhere that saw storms all the time. That night, he repaired a fireplace in River Valley City with a mending charm, linked it to Rivendell via the Floo network, tossed in some Floo powder, and stepped through. Elrond was away. After a brief greeting with his sons Elrohir and Eladon, Dewey mounted his flying broom and headed east toward the Misty Mountains. He aimed for the High Pass, a narrow canyon famous for its frequent storms. The stone giants were long gone. Only the scars from their games remained, huge gouges and a trail of tumbled boulders. Dewey found a sheltered, shadowed spot in the pass and buried the crystal vial deep in the cold earth, then wove a few wards around it for protection. He stood a long while watching the clouded sky. With the weather here, a thunderstorm could not be far off. Satisfied, he returned to Rivendell and then home by way of the Floo. Back in River Valley City, he stepped out of the hearth to find Gandalf waiting. "Did it go well?" the wizard asked. Dewey grinned. "Very smoothly. Now we just wait for the next thunderstorm." Gandalf, eyes twinkling, laughed. "There are plenty of storms in the Misty Mountains. I expect to see your animagus very soon. I'm curious, what will you turn into?" Apart from the rare skin changers, creatures that can truly shift shape, this is the first magic I've seen that makes a person an animal. Dewey wondered himself. There was often a link between an animagus form and one's Patronus, but it wasn't an absolute. A Patronus could change with deep shifts in the heart. Severus Snape's became a doe after Lily's death, and an animagus could likewise diverge. An owl would be an excellent choice. Silent flight, night vision, ideal for stealth. The only caveat was that animagi were generally limited to non-magical animals. Turning into a phoenix, dragon, or thunderbird would be dangerously unpredictable. Still, he couldn't help thinking of Bjorn, the skin changer who became a great bear. No ordinary bear, but colossal and near invulnerable. Gandalf had said such skin changers had once been men blessed by the spirits of the land in the Misty Mountains. If Dewey could learn the nature of that blessing, perhaps his animagus could be advanced in ways no one expected. But that was for the future. He hadn't even finished the current ritual. Durin's day approached, and the party set out once more for the Lonely Mountain. Dewey had no patience for ferrying everyone up the mountain one at a time, as Gandalf might have done. He cast a levitation charm on the whole group, secured them with a long rope, fastened the other end to his broom, and took off. Amid a chorus of startled screams and laughter, he hauled a trail of floating, bobbing companions like a flock of awkward kites. Gandalf, riding behind him, laughed until tears came to his eyes. "Why didn't I think of that?" he chortled. They landed at the backside of the Lonely Mountain. A carved zigzag staircase climbed the slope from the foothills, but Dewey flew straight to its terminal platform, a flat stone ledge with no further path upward. He sat down, and the group disembarked onto the high, wind-cut terrace, the final stretch of their ascent waiting above them.